Hi, I'm Brian Groves with the City of San Angelo, and today I'm joined by Teresa James, our city attorney, and we're here to provide an update on Suddenlink here in San Angelo. So in the summer of 2020, the city put out a survey asking for feedback regarding Suddenlink. Teresa, can you tell us what came of those results?
Yeah, when we got those results, we analyzed them. We kind of went through it to see if there were any patterns that we could see, and it was pretty consistent that people have the same kinds of concerns as their neighbors when it comes to Suddenlink. So I've spent a lot of time talking to other attorneys in other cities, sometimes in other states, trying to see if there was any kind of legal response that we could give that would be of assistance to our citizens. And so far, I've not been able to determine anything the city can do. We also have tried to schedule some forums with folks from Suddenlink to come and listen to our citizens, but the pandemic has made that really difficult for them to travel here, and so that has not been done as well.
So I don't know if you can go into it a little bit more, but why can't the city do anything in regards to Suddenlink disputes with our citizens here in San Angelo?
You know, I think it was like around 2006 or 2007, the Texas legislature changed the kind of franchise that companies like Suddenlink has to state franchise away from local franchises. So it took a lot of local control over those kinds of industries away from cities. And there's nothing in the franchise ability in the state statute that's really helpful in this scenario. The other thing is that, you know, whenever everybody signs up for cable or internet through Suddenlink, they're effectively signing or entering into a residential use agreement. And you may not actually get a copy of it. It might just be something that's referenced as go online if you want to read it. And it could be as simple as you agree to have service in your house and you pay your bill, and that's how that contract is executed. But regardless of how that happens, there are terms and conditions in that particular agreement that limit the city's ability to either gather our citizens together to sue Suddenlink jointly for similar problems or to intercede on their behalf.
So really what it comes down to is that it's not necessarily the city versus Suddenlink, but it is up to each individual to take action against Suddenlink if they have issues. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct, yes.
Okay. So if residents of San Angelo are unhappy, what can they do?
Well, I want to kind of go through what the residential services agreement that we found says. So I'm going to share my screen for a minute. I've developed this little slideshow to kind of educate folks. I want to make it clear that, you know, nobody should consider this legal advice. If you have any questions about your legal rights or responsibilities about your specific contract that you have or your agreement with Suddenlink, you should certainly talk to an attorney. But generally, all of the terms and conditions of those residential agreements are the same. So I want to kind of talk about what some of those are. So first, when you go to section 24 of the residential services agreement, what you'll find is this statement that any and all disputes arising between you and Suddenlink shall be resolved by binding arbitration on an individual basis. So what this means is exactly what you said, Brian, that if somebody wants to sue or take any kind of legal action against Suddenlink, what they're going to have to do is they're going to have to go to arbitration, and they're going to have to do that themselves. So you'll see right down here at the bottom, I put a web address, and I think we're going to post this presentation online so everybody can see this. Here's the web address of the residential services agreement that's the most common. You should verify whether or not that's your agreement, but that is the most common one that we found in Texas. So what is arbitration? Well, it's kind of like a court proceeding, but it doesn't take place in a court. Sometimes it's like in a conference room. Sometimes there's arbitration centers where there is an arbiter, an arbitrator who sits at the top, and then, you know, the parties are down below, and it kind of feels like court, but it's before a private party and not a judge. So it's a little more informal than a court proceeding would be. And during that process, you're allowed to do some discovery, which means you can request documents from Suddenlink, and they can request documents from you, and you would have to provide those. And after all of that process takes place, and everybody has all the information and facts that they want to submit, you submit all of that to the arbitrator. He or she will then review them, and they'll issue a written decision that is binding in a court. Now, there's a couple of monetary triggers here that are important for people to keep in mind. If you're asking for less than $50,000, which I would assume on a residential service contract like this, pretty much everybody would be less than $50,000. You can either have a hearing before the arbitrator, which feels a little more like court, or you can just provide documents and arguments in writing, and he or she will decide on those documents you provide. And the other thing that people should keep in mind is if you ask for less than $10,000 in arbitration, Suddenlink is going to be responsible for paying all of those costs. So there shouldn't be any out-of-pocket costs to citizens if you're asking for less than $10,000. So the first step you have to do, there's really just 3 steps. The first step is you have to fill out a notice of dispute. That means you have to notify Suddenlink in a formal manner what your disagreement with them is and allow them an opportunity to resolve it. So they have in their agreement listed this website right down here. I know that this has changed periodically throughout the time that I've been looking at Suddenlink. So you can use this form if you can find it, but this link may not be good, going into the future. You can also just draft a letter. And the letter needs to explain the dispute, what you're asking for, have some contact information, and it needs to be mailed by certified mail to the address that's listed right here. Now, to help our citizens understand this better, we've drafted a sample notice of dispute letter. So when you go on our website, if you're interested in filing these cases and want to look at our sample documents, this is what the notice of dispute letter looks like. It's the first document that you'll provide. And when you zoom into it, these are the paragraphs in that document. So as you'll see here, our example is first, they promised me inter-service speeds, and they failed to deliver. Second, they advertised services I thought I had, but I'm not getting them. Third, they're charging more. Four, they're not timely repairing outages. There might be other concerns that people are having that they would be able to list here. So if you're going to use the sample notice, you modify this to whatever your circumstances are. And then the last paragraph right here is, in resolution of the dispute, I demand what? Our example says a refund of all of our fees for the last 12 months and refund that immediately. You might be demanding something different, but whatever that is, you would put it in the last paragraph. And then if you look at our sample again.
Hey, so those, if you go back to the slide that you were just there, so correct me if I'm wrong, all of those things was information that we got from the survey from the citizens. Is that correct?
That's correct. Whenever we drafted this sample notice, we tried to include the most common complaints that we had from our citizens. So I would think that most of our citizens would look at these and they would identify themselves in one of these particular provisions. The other thing we've done is all the information other than what your dispute is that is needed to be provided. We've included slots for that or spaces for that at the bottom of the letter that you'll see right down here. And so just make sure you complete all of that, and then your letter is ready to be mailed, and we've included the mailing address up here at the top. And again, certified mail is really important, and the reason for that is after you mail your letter, you have to wait 30 days from the date they receive it to take any further action. So when you send a certified letter, you'll know the date that they received that letter, and that's when you can start counting those 30 days. Now, hopefully within that 30 days, you're going to hear from Suddenlink and they're going to try to resolve your concern. But if they don't, the next step, which is the third step, is you begin arbitration. And you do that by first sending a demand for arbitration to the American Arbitration Association at this address. Again, you'll see down at the bottom, we've included a link for a copy of that demand for arbitration form. But the demand is actually 2 different things. It's first a form, and it's second a statement of claim document. So again, to assist our citizens, we have downloaded the form for them, and you'll see that right here. You probably can't see it, it's a little bit small on the screen, but when you actually look at this form online, you'll see that we have pre-filled some of the information that might be confusing for our citizens to fill out, but you will need to complete the remainder of this document. And the second part of this is filing your statement of claim. And again, we have a sample statement of claim document that we've drafted where it says name right up here. You would put your name, you would take that out and just put your name up there. And then the paragraphs in this are very much like the paragraphs in the dispute letter, where it kind of outlines for the arbitrator what your claim is. I mean, what was the concern you were having? So again, we have this as a draft form, a sample form for our citizens to use if they're interested in filing arbitration in these kind of cases. So in summary, it's really not that difficult. First thing you do is you send that notice of dispute letter by certified mail to Suddenlink. Second, you wait 30 days from the date of receipt of that letter by Suddenlink, and then you file demand for arbitration by sending those 2 forms, the form and the statement of claims, to the AAA case filing services with a copy to Suddenlink. And again, we have more detailed instructions about all of this on our website to help you if you are interested in pursuing these claims. And even if you're not interested in actually going to an arbitration hearing, at least filing that notice of dispute in the formal manner. I know a lot of us have called customer service and have been frustrated by the inability of them to help us. If we all file that notice of dispute letter at the corporate level, perhaps, that would get places that we haven't been able to go so far. And then, sometimes it's really, scary for folks who aren't attorneys to think about representing themselves in any kind of proceeding that has any kind of legal aspect to it. Well, if you're interested in more information about how to represent yourself, you can go to this web address right here. Now, pro se essentially means, participating by yourself or representing yourself in a legal proceeding, and they'll have more information there on how you can represent yourself in these arbitration proceedings. That's kind of the help we want to give our citizens. We can't necessarily file claims on your behalf. I can't represent you as an attorney for your claim, but we did want to give you the tools you need to be able to file these disputes and these requests for arbitration by yourself.
Thank you for that presentation. That was a lot of really good information, and you kind of touched on my next question. Talk about a little bit more in depth on why the city attorney's office can't represent citizens of San Angelo in their own case or arbitration case against Suddenlink.
Well, first of all, there are those provisions that say that it's going to be an individual arbitration, so we couldn't represent too many of you at the same time. But second, I am hired to represent the city as an entity, and so my representation of anybody outside of the city, as well as any of my attorneys in my office, is limited to representation of just the city. So again, I want to make sure that all of this it's clear that this is all information for folks. It's intended to be educational. Nobody has to use any of these forms. If anybody has questions about the process, I would encourage them to talk to an attorney about it. But as far as us representing them directly, that's just not something we're into.
So if someone was going to talk to an attorney about this, what's the best way for someone to find that resource online?
Anytime you're looking for an attorney, if you go to the Texas Bar website, there is an attorney referral link on there where you fill in information. If you know the name of the attorney, it'll look up, their contact information, or if you just know what area of law you're interested in, you can put that in and your location, and it'll bring up a list of attorneys for you to contact.
Okay. So kind of switching gears, since I have you on here, some of the questions and comments that we get a lot about Suddenlink is that the city is preventing others from coming in and providing the same service. So can you talk about that? I already know the answer to the question, but is the city preventing cable and internet companies from coming into the city?
No, absolutely. We do not have any capability to prevent anybody from coming in. I think that's kind of a misconception on development just in general. We don't have any ability to tell businesses yes or no. They just come and we tell them what rules they have to follow. And again, in the telecommunications arena, that's a state franchise. And so we have even less control over that than we would otherwise. One thing we did explore is whether or not we could do our own internet service provider, or whether Costa DC could, and we are, prohibited from doing either one of those things as well. So not only are we not, limiting other people, we even researched whether or not we could provide those services ourselves.
So you've kind of referenced it before, but kind of explain what the franchise agreement is. And there was some changes in the past that have affected what we can do now. So to kind of explain what the franchise agreement is for people who might not know what that is.
Yeah, a franchise agreement is basically an agreement between the city and another party who is using our rights of way to conduct business. And so before, I think it was 2006, we had a specific franchise agreement with any cable provider that came into San Angelo. And through that, we could, address some sort of, some usage kinds of concerns that might rise, that you have to serve the entire city and those kind of things. And we would have more ability to review the operations of a business through a franchise agreement. Whenever the state took that franchise authority away from us, basically all we do is receive whatever amount of money that the state says we can receive for these providers using our right of way. So a lot of our control over them was very strictly, taken away from us.
Okay. So to kind of wrap everything up, why are we putting this out, and maybe touch on what are other cities doing with this, if they're having similar issues with Suddenlink or other companies?
Well, I will tell you, lots of other cities are having similar issues. I've spoken to at least 3 attorneys from different states who are having similar issues. I'm on an city attorney listserv, and a lot of the conversation right now on that listserv is, how do we bring cable providers and internet providers to the table to discuss, these kind of service issues with our citizens and with our councils. And you're just so limited by it. And so we are trying to think outside of the box. If this is the way that Suddenlink wants complaints brought to them, well, then I think we need to educate our citizens on how to do that. So I think it's very important to help people figure out how they can get help. If we're not able to help them, well, this is the way they can help themselves. And it was very important to me that we, educate our public about that.
You might say it's no different than us providing guidance on how to get a birth certificate from the county or how to get a permit. It's just providing a way of a means of functions for the citizens and to accomplish.
That's absolutely right. It's no different than any of the other educational services we provide, or that agencies like legal aid or the Texas Attorney General's office provides on child support and divorce and all of those sorts of legal proceedings. We're just trying to offer, some sample forms and information on how citizens can help themselves in this regard.
All right. You have anything else you want to add?
No, I do not.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time and putting all this information together. We greatly appreciate your time.
Sure. It's my pleasure. Thank you.